So, hi, Amanda.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm all right, thank you.
So, this is one of four podcasts all about narcissism. So, we're going to just unpack it a little bit. And narcissism is a big word, as we know, and it's a big topic. And lots of people are using the word narcissist kind of on trend and sometimes labeling people for the wrong reasons. So, it'd be really good for us to unpack and debunk the sort of the myths around what true proper narcissism is all about, and not just someone's an unkind, nasty, slightly toxic, unpleasant person, because there's a big difference between the two. So what I wanted to ask you is, how do you recognize the signs of a true narcissist at the very beginning?
Well, I mean, most of this you're going to be able to feed back to me because this is just from my personal perspective, and you're the expert in this field. So, it's from my perspective, it's that need for admiration, and it's not something that you tend to know from the get-go. It's something that after a few occasions that you've met somebody that you start to recognize the signs, or you might not recognize those signs until you're deep into the relationship and you start questioning their behavior. But a few things that stand out for me is that need for admiration, that lack of empathy, that grandiosity. It's always they're always right, and whatever you do, it's always that it's not quite right. And so what's that about? So what's your take on this, Jen?
I think it's very much from the first date. It's there. You do see
Yeah.
it. You do spot it. And often they're very subtle at the very beginning. And it can be little things about how they talk about somebody. They always play that they're the victim. So old relationships, they don't take responsibility for why old relationships have gone wrong. They perhaps, if you're going into a restaurant or a bar, they want to sit in, the best place. They don't talk to the waiting staff particularly well. They've got this air of arrogance and ego. And that doesn't go with a true narcissist. That's there from day one. And it's very prominent from day one. But they play it down as in it's about everybody else. It's that poor me
Mm.
victim mentality. So that's to me is one of the biggest signs that you'll spot. And they'll reel you in because they always go for empathetic women. So women that have high empathy go, oh, poor thing, they've really had a hard time. Their ex treated them badly, or this happened, or that happened. And they get the sympathy vote. And if they know that they've got the sympathy vote early on, yes, prime prey, fresh meat in front of
Yeah.
them. So I think that's really important, is to look for the signs. If someone
Mm.
seems to be trying too hard, or if someone's asking you a lot of questions about yourself, they're wanting to, unpack you. It's so that they are trying to connect with you quite quickly. And also they will then use all of that against you later on. Believe me, they use everything, and they
Mm.
find your weaknesses, your chinks in your armor, where they can get to you at a later date.
And since I've been having these conversations with you, you've really opened my eyes to, my awareness about how I look back now on relationships,
Yeah.
and how the early warning signs were there. But I just didn't know that they were warning signs. Nobody really painted it for me to say, well, this is what you've got to watch out for. And I've tested this out a few times with meeting new people, how in a sort of an experimental environment, and
Yeah.
I'm so much more clearer on those signs now. And you're right, absolutely right. You see that from the first from the get-go. I
You
think
do.
what I appreciated that you told me was, give somebody the benefit of the doubt if you think perhaps it might be sort of bordering, or, you're not quite sure, and maybe a second date, a third date. So and I've tried that out as well. And that
Yeah.
actually has really either amplified that message,
Yep.
which is, yes,
Yep.
definitely a narcissist, Or, oh, I see what you meant by that, and that's just your nature, and I understand. Especially
Yeah.
when it comes to being on the spectrum as well. I find my son's autistic, and I get it. Sometimes he comes across as very rude, but he doesn't mean to be. He's just very straight talking. And that can come across perhaps in a sort of gaslighting way if you were on a date and you were not quite sure why somebody is, all very eager, and then they shut down because they're in other environments, then they can only, cope with so much. So it's not, it's not something that is, something, you've got to watch out for with absolutely everybody, because we're all so different. It's just using your better judgment and saying what clearly is gaslighting, what's clearly narcissism here, and what's not. And I think you're making some really valid points here.
And it's one of those things, with people are drawn to narcissists for a reason. And when we do the workshops, we often look and unpack it. And once you know what your reason is, you can't unsee that again. You just can't. And often it's if you've had a parent that was slightly narcissistic, so narcissism, you're familiar with narcissism. And when you become familiar with narcissism or narcissistic traits, what you then do is you normalize that behavior. So narcissists can get away with it with you, and they can reel you in a lot quicker because you've normalized some of these behaviors and patterns that have become familiar to you. And that's how they get themselves and reel themselves in. And that's why they ask questions about yourself, because they want to know if you're one of those people that has actually perhaps had a bit of a tough childhood, had a bit of a tough time, has had parents who weren't always there, all of those things, that means you will tolerate their behavior more than most people would.
And do you think this just because we've, people have had those experiences from childhood or in previous experiences, and they've got it sort of locked in their subconscious? Do you feel that once they learn about the role of the narcissist and what they are projecting, that they can change and block that and stop that?
Oh, absolutely. Once you learn, you can't unlearn. Once you've got it, it's a bit like, I'm going to use a really weird analogy, but go with me on this one. You're on a bicycle, one route you're going to fall off. You've been down this route three times, it's very bumpy, you've fallen off, you've hurt yourself. But there's another route, perhaps not as pretty, not as much of an adrenaline rush, doesn't give you the same kick, but it's safe, and it's a good route. It's a good route to get back. Now, what happens when we are addicted to narcissism is we become addicted to that high adrenaline rush, that little bit of uncertainty, and we don't want to take the safe route. We want to go down this route because we're determined to fix it. We're determined to make those changes and fix it and get down there without falling off. It's impossible. You're always going to fall off on that route.
That's
But
a really good analogy.
there's something about us that makes us keep wanting to go back and prove ourselves wrong and try and fix the route, fix the bike, fix what's happening. Whereas actually the other route is really good. It's solid, it's safe, it's secure, it can give you everything that you want. It can get you to the destination. It just won't give you the same thrill. And this is what happens when people try and redate after dating a narcissist, is they say, oh, but they find everyone else boring. They like the high drama, the high energy. They want to fix this person. And that's something that I unpack with clients, why they want to fix that person, because there's a deep-rooted, this isn't something to go into in a podcast, and everyone's story is different, but there are deep-rooted reasons why we want to fix it and create another story. You can't ever fix a true narcissist.
No.
You can't.
No.
There's just, unless they go off and they have proper therapy and they want to change, and they want to make the changes, and it comes from them, and they realize they're not having authentic, true, connected relationships, and they're miserable, that's not going to change. But spotting the signs early on are key. And if we look at the three main things, it is that ego sort of state of I'm more important, that grandiosity, I'm more important than other people. It is that victim mentality. Poor me.
Yeah.
If nothing's been their fault and they take no blame for anything that's happened in their life, then, and it's always somebody else, run. Absolutely run. Don't even try the second or third date. Run. And you know, if they are doting on you and trying to get as much out of you and putting you on a pedestal and falling in love with you quickly, wanting to connect with you very quickly, that again, very early on, is a huge red flag.
And I get that with you know, us, you know, when we're in that state of I need to repair, I need to heal, we tend to look externally rather than look internally. So it really is about self-awareness, isn't it? It's about healing the wounded child within, or you know, whatever, wherever that wound comes from. And I love the analogy with the bike, because when we do start to look at how we can heal ourselves and then go down the route that is a safe, sure path, you know, to successful, thriving relationships, we have a very different experience. So it really is starting with us, isn't it, rather than trying to fix those that can't be fixed.
And I think one of the other things is, if you are attracted to narcissists, you've got this, most of the women that I've worked with, and men actually, a lot of men have been in narcissistic relationships. One of the things is you have got rose-tinted glasses on, you have got that romanticism, and that you are fairly romantic and high empathy, probably slightly anxious as well, because when you're slightly anxious, you want to please others, you want to think the best of others, you want to take each opportunity and make it into something special. Because at the end of the day, if you're in love with love, it's one of the things that we do. But the danger is we fall in love with the potential of what love could be, not the reality of what's actually presented in front of us. And when you're falling in love with what someone is trying to hook you in with, and your story of what love looks like, it's, you know, you're projecting your story of what you want love to be like, and it's like fitting a square peg into a round hole, or very much a round peg into a square hole, because there'll be a lot of things that will be missing, that person is just incapable of giving to you.
And they say that narcissists are unaware of how they are subjecting themselves onto their, you know, I don't like to use the word victim, to their prey, because it's just about feeding that, you know, that which is obviously wounded in themselves. So are you saying that you know, they are aware that they are looking for a certain type of person, or is it do you think it's just a subconscious thing, and they
I
just,
think it's
that's what they
subconscious.
need to feed off of?
Yeah, they know the type
Okay.
that they are attracted to.
Yeah.
They know the type that is, they probably don't know why they like that type, but there's always a sort of a narcissistic reason that they like that type. It's because that prey is much easier
Yeah.
to home in on. And yeah, it's a bit like going fishing. You're going to fish in a lake that you know there are fish in. You're not going to go
Yeah.
and fish in a lake with bait that has just got little sprats in that you're not interested in.
Exactly.
They know what to look for and what works for them.
So, you know, if say, you know, we're in a relationship and we're, you know, down the line, and we've been maybe in it for 2 or 3 years, and we're, you know, somebody's listening to this podcast and they think, well, actually, you know, this is ringing true for me. You know, now I recognize that actually this was happening to me from the beginning. You know, what would you say if you're in a relationship and you realize that it's narcissistic? What would you say?
I'd say get some help and listen to some of our other podcasts, because we are going to cover
Yeah,
this in some
brilliant.
of our other podcasts. But I would say, you know, reach out for help if you're not strong enough to end it. And often at that point, you're so drawn in, you can't see it for what it really is, then just talk to a coach, talk to someone who specializes in narcissism. There aren't that many of us around, but it is important to sense check your reality, because it could just be even you're feeling insecure. Not everyone is a narcissist. Not everyone is. Some people have just poor behavior, and we will talk some of the things that you can do, and the conversations you can have will be on debunking that in some of our later podcasts. But I think it is one of those things that you have to recognize it first, and don't dismiss it. Don't dismiss it. And obviously, if there's violence, if there's sexual coercion, if there's financial coercion, then you do need to get help quite quickly, because that only gets worse. It doesn't get better.
Of course. And then I know from my experience, prevention is better than cure, because once you're in it, it does incorporate many of those different traits, as you say, the financial coercion, sexual, deviance, it's, all of that sort of thing. And I think if we are more aware, then we can get the help we need in the earlier stages before it gets too embroiled, and we can't really get that. I always feel it's like a tick, and it's got its suckers in, and you have to peel it away very, very gently so that it doesn't leave that lasting this impact on you that's going to go on to perhaps create other devastating relationships. So it's about recognizing it and then breaking those patterns and moving on.
It is, and it's very important. And Amanda, just like with your story, it is important to get the right help and speak to the right people, to give you the confidence. And often what happens with the whole gaslighting piece that we have around narcissism, what happens is you doubt your own ability to make proper conscious decisions. That seems to be taken away from you. So I always say to people, it's worth an exploratory conversation with someone, just for you to wonder, even if it's just to say, are they or aren't they? Is it just me? Am I feeling vulnerable? Am I in a different place in my life? So I'd always say double check it with somebody, because if you've got that seed of doubt, there's a reason you've got that seed of doubt, and your gut doesn't often let you down. And that's something we've spoken about a lot, is about gut instinct and trusting your gut in projecting forward what all of this means.
Yeah, I love that, because that's actually, it gives people reassurance. There's nothing wrong with asking and getting just some feedback, just to look, can you, just tell me what's going on here? Do I need to get that help? And sometimes it might just be a self-esteem thing. We might need to build our own confidence. There might be something that's going on with ourselves internally, but it's much better to be self-aware, and then we can make the right steps forward. Well, thank you so much for that, Jen. It's been really interesting starting this series, and I'm sure we're going to uncover a lot over the course of this 4 podcasts to really give some valid and valuable advice to many. So thank you.
Welcome. Thank you for being so open about your story as well. Thank you.
Bless you.